holy woman, I've forgotten who she is, came and took him down and restored him to life, and he had to be executed all over again in a different way. But he's always portrayed as sort of the human pincushion here. But in some cases, there were actually holes and real arrows were inserted into the picture. But this Saint Sebastian doesn't have much religious resonance. It's basically a Greek or Roman athlete statue, and the ruined Roman architecture is fascinating to everyone who's into that, and everyone was. The ruins they have an iconographic intent, because the ruins are supposed to show the ancient world passing away with the coming of the Christian disposition. But look at the background. This is where I think Renaissance artists reveal the escapist aspect, and there are many others I could have shown. But in the background, we see mountains that nature doesn't make. And on top of them, if you did find an overhanging cliff like this, would you build a castle on top of it? And here's another one with a castle on top of it, but this poor castle is going to not only fall itself, it's going to get it when this one falls. We have this amazing outcropping over here, and I could show dozens of these, but most Quattrocento pictures will have these extremely elaborate fantasy backgrounds. And the fantasy is escapist. It's to be enjoyed. It's to be wondered at and thought about. It's entertainment. And the secular art that we begin to get at the same time is all about entertainment. I'm a technological basket case. This is, I'm not going to say much about this, but this is Leonardo, obviously. Leonardo introduces the High Renaissance with his pyramid compositions, of which this is an excellent example. His sfumato, which means smoke, that's this sort of smoky shadows that partially engulf the figures, not as much in this as in some others. But this is supposed to be a scene that occurs on the flight into Egypt, where the young John the Baptist is brought by an angel to join the Holy Family. And so the angel on the right is actually sort of supporting the infant Christ, who is blessing John the Baptist on the left, who is embraced by the Virgin Mary. Nice pyramid composition. But look at those rocks. There's a reason that this picture got the name, the Virgin of the Rocks, because we can't help but stare at those rocks and wonder what's holding them up and what on earth could be going on here. Now, Leonardo finished very few of his pictures. He actually painted 2 of this one because the French carried one off and he had to paint a replacement. But he finished very few of his pictures. If the Mona Lisa's background had been finished, we can see it would have this same sort of bizarre landscape in it. Michelangelo, this is an early painting by him, and he didn't do many early paintings. This is the Holy Family, but you notice it's sort of difficult to follow what's going on, whose limbs belong to whom. Michelangelo sort of twisted and turned his figures in every direction. If you think of putting yourself in the position of St. Joseph, whose knees are here and here, you realize that this cannot be. And much of Michelangelo's work is like this. It actually defies reality. And he is beginning to move in the direction of what will be called mannerism. Just beginning in this picture. but the sort of strange mottled light and shadow is going to point in that direction. And this very odd background, there's a little wall, and John the Baptist is looking across the wall, and then there are a bunch of naked young guys. Now, I've read the interpretation, and I accept the interpretation, that this is supposed to show the barrier between the Holy Family and the secular world. But I don't think that it doesn't come across in the same way that an icon does. It comes across as something to be enjoyed, and something sensual, something to be entertained with, to wonder at, to ask questions about, and this is part of the Renaissance escapism. Mannerism is really Renaissance escapism on steroids. No need to explain why this picture is called the Madonna with the long neck. But not only is her neck quite long, but she has serpentine fingers that do not have bones and joints. They just slither like snakes. Her hips are the size of an SUV. Her hairdo would have taken hours by skilled Hollywood people to create. She's got all these jewels. Look at this. This is her navel. These are her knees. We don't know why all kinds of people have been crammed into one corner like a Japanese bus. While we look in the distance, and we can't really tell whether we're looking at a man who's half a mile away or a man who's 2 feet tall. Now, the picture's not finished. There would have been capitals, there would have been a capital on top of that column, and there would have been another figure there. He only painted the foot. This is somebody else's foot. But the entertainment value of the picture overwhelms any possibility of this being used as an object of devotion. I think it's worth thinking about these weeping icons, miraculous icons, and so forth. They are never Renaissance or Baroque or anything. They are almost always of the old iconographic school, where the spiritual quality is evident immediately, and the physical is not allowed to overwhelm it. Now, because of the Chapman exhibit, I definitely wanted to show you a Caravaggio. Caravaggio is the turning point from Mannerism into Baroque. When I walked into the Chapman exhibit, I thought, a room full of Caravaggios, because the coloring and the lighting is all very, very similar to this. This is the calling of St. Matthew. Now, who is St. Matthew? There's actually some debate about that. I think it's reasonably clear that this man is St. Matthew. Where is Christ? You have to think, this is Christ? Probably the most difficult person to see in the picture is Christ. And this is not necessarily going to be typical of the Baroque. The Baroque is going to be swept up into the Counter-Reformation, and it's going to be have a lot of religious impact. But it's going to carry with it the artist's concern for lighting, the chiaroscuro, which is really, really extreme in Caravaggio and in later Baroque painters, and the artist's cleverness, the artist's the sensual qualities of clothing and jewelry and so forth. All of that is going to be carried in with the Baroque, and the Baroque is so theatrical that often it comes across as false. And the least element of falsity will destroy the religious and spiritual quality of any picture. And that's my broad assertion for what it's worth. I think one of the reasons that the unrealistic icons carry religious power is their lack of physical realism, because physical realism is in itself an element of deception. It's trying to make you think you're seeing something you're not. And even that little bit of dishonesty, I think, can be a problem. I won't make a big pronouncement there, but I think it can be a problem from a religious perspective. So that's as far as I felt I could take it, so thank you for your time. Questions from anybody?
When the three of us were walking around the Chapman exhibit, what were you're both kind of quiet, you in particular were very quiet. So I'm curious, you said you thought, oh my gosh, we're in the room full of Caravaggios, but ultimately, what did you come to, what did you walk away with? What were your thoughts and how did you respond to it?
Well, I thought it was the art of religious questioning. I thought that his concern for religion was, and even reverence for it, was clear. I didn't feel that he had any answers, either for himself or raising questions. And sometimes there were questions about identity. Well, that's a very modern thing, but that could be a religious issue, and probably should be a religious issue.
And I had the same kind of thinking, but I didn't go into it. I'm not sure that I ever really look at art expecting to see truth, except for in iconography, knowing that specifically icons are meant to do that. And Chapman does what he is meant to do, which is seek after truth, and because he does respect religion, and I'm not sure exactly what his religious background is, Christian of some kind, because there's a lot of imagery down there taken directly from the scriptures. So definitely seeking and searching, which, as I said, is a good thing. I'm all for seeking and searching, and I did also come away thinking that they were, I'm not an art critic by any stretch, but I did like the coloring. I liked, with Arthur putting out the Caravaggio here, as art, I think that's great. I like the Caravaggio. I like the coloring and things like that is there. So for what it is, it was good, but not presenting the truth, but a search for truth, which is what we are doing in our culture. And search the truth and find it in Christ would be my answer.
A very particular question. In the icon of the resurrection, in both instances, the mountains in the background were split in two and shaped in a very particular manner. And I was wondering what in particular that was referencing.
Sure, meant to show, and I'm not 100% on it, but it's meant to close the picture itself, which it does, but then also to show that a place, that it is a place, and it's not something that can be contained. It's not, if an event occurs in an icon inside, you'll see images of building structure, not like building structure that the Roman, right. It kind of shows that it's external. It is something that is in a location that is outside there. Does one of the iconographers want to give a better answer than that as far as the mountains and the icon of the resurrection?
His question was the mountains.
Yes.
Well, I think your answer is excellent. The only thing I could add to that is that very often in iconography, the mountains are symbolic of the spiritual journey.
Yeah, I would add that the mountains all look like the ones you saw in the resurrection icon. They're very stylized. They're not like natural mountains at all. And I think the Renaissance picked up on that because mountains are the thing that is most unreal and weird most often in Renaissance pictures.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Dr. White, I couldn't help but be struck by your last comment about how as realism comes into the art, it becomes more dishonest to an extent.
Right.
So I have two questions. The first is, what would be your comment as, especially in a sort of pop art today, one of the very trends that people are enthusiastic about is photorealism, ultra-realistic art. And branching off of that, if you were talking to someone who was, let's say, really excited by that sort of thing, this sort of realism, as many people are, how would you speak to that person in a way that could perhaps show them the value, which I think is apparent in, say, something of an icon, which is more simplistic or unrealistic art, but certainly perhaps to the modern mindset, how would you bring someone to that point? Because it might not be apparent.
Well, I think one of the things that what both of us have said is trying to point out is that sacred art is one particular thing. And I don't mean that it's in its own category. And that doesn't invalidate all these other kinds of art, which are for enjoyment and or for some sort of message or for all kinds of other purposes. It's just that sacred art is its own thing. It seems to work best with the methods that were evolved over time to do that. And so those traditional icon styles are what works best for that. That doesn't invalidate doing something else with paint. I think it's ironic, though, that when you read art history books, it sounds like every step towards realism is a step towards the right way. And then you come to the 20th century chapter, and suddenly that's not the right way. If we're going to appreciate abstract art, then surely we can appreciate non-realistic art that has a definite purpose. So I've always thought there was a kind of, it's like one author stepped out and another author stepped in and said, okay, now realism isn't good anymore. I think realism is wonderful. I like hyper-realism. I like some abstraction, but they all have different roles. I think that what I would try to do would be make someone understand that this religious art works, that it does fulfill its purpose, whether that purpose means anything to that individual or not.
Okay, so you opened with the quote of how icons do the color of what Scripture is supposed to do with words. And as you're going and you're explicating how there's very precise symbolism in everything. Would these have been used in places of the Scripture to help since these are largely illiterate society, and whatnot, would they sort of be used in the same way as we would complete the Scripture nowadays?
In a sense, yes, because
it's the instructions of what's in it.
exactly. Anybody could walk. The idea would be that the believers would walk into the church, and because they didn't have a Bible at home, that doesn't happen for over 1,000 years before the church after the church is already doing what it's doing. They would walk into a church and would be able to see these icons, and it would be able to tell them the story of what the Scripture is supposed to be talking about and how it's fulfilled. And so really, even the icon of the resurrection would very rarely, I would say even almost never, be by itself, but also clumped with the rest of the story. And so if you go into some of the beautiful Orthodox churches, ours will be that one day, you'll have every inch of the church is covered on the interior with some kind of iconographic depiction, which would tell a complete story from start to finish of the work of God and His interaction with us. And so that would be the purpose of walking into that place, to know that story, to see that So when you walk into the church, you see that story and you hear that story while you are participating in the worship of the church, which is what it's meant to be.
And would that symbolism have been common knowledge, or would they have had to use what four gods almost the same place?
That's a good question. I'm not sure what they would have done in the 3rd, 4th century with those sorts of things, but I would imagine that because it's the same symbolism in each place, that there would be a common language with that. And so it might be, now that I've pointed some of these things out to you, you'll be able to look at a different icon of the transfiguration of Christ or something like that, and you'd be able to see and understand more of what that icon means because you know what those symbols mean in the icon of the resurrection. So there would be that common language that they would know, and that's why an icon follows those rules across the board all of the time, or else it's not an icon. It's then something
I'd
else.
add one thing to that, and that is, I think often the illiterate person would not understand all of these things, but they would see the cross in the halo, and after a while recognize that as Christ. So bit by bit, things would become clear, because you have to remember, in the societies that produced this, people were in church a lot, and so there would be a sort of gradual dawning of understanding, and I don't think it would be necessary for them to know what every Greek letter represented.
Just like every time we read the scripture, we get something new out of it. Lord willing, every time we see an icon, we get something new out of it as well. And that goes really with any art. The more familiar you are with it, and I didn't notice the little foot that Arthur pointed out, that incomplete person that's there. But when you study the picture, you see that. And the same thing with the iconography. The theology of the church seems simple, but there's so much depth there. And the beauty of the icons is that it's able to say some of that depth without, that you don't have to know it to appreciate it, but then you get to know it and get to learn it and grasp it each time you see it.
I wanted to ask about the Virgin with the long hair.
Yes.
I've looked at that a lot in books, for instance,
Uh-huh.
but I've wondered about if you just apply your imagination to it and nothing else, if it could be an emblem of how Mary had to let go of her thinking process completely, her little head, and this long harder to her body, where the navel is emphasized, and we know what happened there, and the large thighs, and they're kind of relaxed and open, that she trusted the sensual world that the Holy Spirit was asking of her, and therefore let go of what was required of her as a good woman in that time.
I like that interpretation. I think it's a wonderful interpretation. I don't know that Parmigianino had that in mind. I think that the fact that you can look at it and think that is part of the value of the picture. I mean, I think that that's what the Chapman pictures are intended for. They're intended for us to go and look at and think of what it might mean and come up with an interpretation, which may have nothing to do with what Gabriel value. If it's as beautiful as the one you came up with, then it's of great value. So.
If you would say to us what you said in your lecture on this in church about the baby, which is vastly oversized also, looking dead?
Yes, it is deliberate for the baby to look dead, and you'll find that in a number of Renaissance and Baroque pictures, because it's prefiguring the crucifixion. And often, and this is really true of many of the old icons of the Theotokos, as the Virgin Mary is called in the East, that she is sad and tender, and the sadness is, of course, a prefiguring of the sadness that she will experience at the crucifixion. So, in the case of the baby, yes, Parmigianino definitely has an iconographic intention in making it look dead. Now, why he made it look so big and why it looks like it's going to fall onto the ground at any moment, that's another matter. I don't know why he did that. But, you know, he may have had something in mind that we don't know, but we don't know, and that puts it in a different category.